Good morning, Facebook family. Our third attempt today to gather with you for the 10,000 Club today. So funny, but here we are again, third try. Absolutely. Welcome, Doug and Cindy.
Welcome. Hey, hello. Thank you. Great day. We're all together. This is exciting.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Well, we're going to be talking about the listing to close checklist today. Good. And Kim Anderson has been the keeper of this document for years. And I really think of it as a living document, one that she continuously updates as things grow and change, and we learn better ways and more effective ways of doing things. But I'm thinking about the third time that we started this live stream today, but I started thinking about a recipe, you guys. And so, you know, when we're gonna make something or bake something, you know, we get out that little recipe card and we know that here are all the steps that are necessary to get to the end goal of those cookies. And if we jump to the third step or the fourth step without doing the first 5 things, you know, it's never going to turn out right.
Not going to turn out so well, right?
Yep. Like sometimes it'll bake and it'll look like a cookie, but maybe you didn't mix all of the dry goods together first, right? And then you started adding in the wet ingredients, the eggs and the oil. So much like the recipe for a good cookie recipe, to have a successful cookie, you need to follow the instructions, follow the ingredients. And so I want to look at Kim's checklist as the recipe towards a successful closing, right? I mean, that's what we're looking for.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep, we sure are.
Well, yeah. I love food, so this is good that wait a minute, we're not talking about food.
Right. But well,
if we were hungry. Food, I'm hungry, you can tell. So, yeah. But I totally agree. I mean, the recipe, you know, starts with, you know, the information that you're going to want to have when you get a listing appointment. You know, I use the word jazz because I'm pretty jazzed when I get to say, okay, hey, I'm going to go list these people's home. I'm ready for this. My energy is high. And then the first thing when reality hits is, oh my word, what do I have to do first? And what do I have to do in preparation before I get to the kitchen table? And this goes back to what you just talked about with that recipe card, right? Mm-hmm. What do we got to do first? And Cindy, I know that you obviously are as many listing appointments that you go on. There's a recipe card for you too, right?
Oh yeah, and I like to be prepared at my listings too. I'll fumble all over the place if I don't, and this is perfect because it's something you can look at, you can check off, and kind of give you as a guide on what to do next.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Much of it is really gathering information. And the number one thing is you have to get the appointment. Without the appointment, you have nothing, right? So,
right.
So this is, I've got the appointment. I'm going to go and I'm going to sit down with people. And this basically tells us all the steps that you need to do in order to procure that perfect cookie. So, it starts with information. Who are your clients? Start gathering that information. Find out as many things as you can about them and about their property in advance of going to see them. We call these our pre-listing steps. And, my pre-listing steps might look different. Cindy, what are some of the things that you do in your pre-listing?
Well, what I like to do is, first of all, I like to get as much information from the client on the phone. Mm-hmm. It kind of gives me a guideline, any updates, things like that. I feel like I'm a little better prepared when I'm looking at comps and things like that. But I want to obviously get the basics, like you said, their phone number, their email. I don't want to call them back and say, hey, oh, by the way, I forgot to get your email. Mm-hmm. And so I want to get as much information as I can. So when I do sit down with them, I have proper information, and I'm not going back and doing a second step trying to get the basics.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to echo what you just said, because getting as much information up front as you can on the phone. A practice that I have is when I sit down then at the kitchen table or wherever we're meeting, the first things I do is reference some of the things that we talked about on the phone. Mm-hmm. Now, you said you're moving to Phoenix. Now, you said you needed to be there by such and such a date. Well, you said also you'd like to list your property at whatever. And so again, a lot of the things that happen on the conversation on the phone, again, just it makes it just easier to kind of open up that same conversation at the kitchen table, right? Yeah. And you come in prepared. You don't come in saying, hey, where are you going to go and how soon are you going to be there and what's that look like? You're the pro. You know what you're saying to people. And again, the checklist is in place for that very reason, so that you stay on course, you stay on track with some of those questions that a lot of times we need to know up front, right, gang?
Yeah. And it shows, it helps you, like you said, be a pro, be a professional, because they're relying on you.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of emotion going on with those sellers looking to sell their house, if they're going to relocate. So they're looking for somebody that can guide them and help them through all the steps.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I like what you said, Doug, because when you sat down, and I like to sit at the kitchen table too, by the way, I'll always ask them, hey, where would you like to meet? And when they say the kitchen table, that's like the perfect place to meet, because that's where life happens, at the kitchen table, right?
No question. Yep.
The day's life, whatever, it happens right there. So you're sort of meeting them in a very comfortable place. But I like how you said, that was really interesting, because when you said you recall some of the things that were said on the phone that day, it's like you're establishing this relationship, like, oh yeah, remember when we talked before? And there's the layers of the relationship begin to build in that moment.
Yep.
And so I really like that. So
and it shows you're listening. It
Mhm.
shows you're listening, because
Yeah.
how often do you get to that appointment and you're sitting there and you're feeling like, well, did I gather all the right information? Did I ask the right questions ahead of time? If you just reiterate a lot of what you talked about on the phone, they come from a different place at that point in time.
Mhm.
Emotionally, they're like, hey, this guy really cares. And this guy really is listening to our needs, wants, wishes, desires, all of those things. And so for me, that is just a perfect opening of how to have that conversation. Yes, it probably comes with a cup of coffee and a cookie at the kitchen table, maybe.
Darn.
Again, it's that casual conversation at the kitchen table. Cindy, to your point, with a lot of emotion, because this is an emotional experience, right? So it's important to come across very much like the pro, but that again, you're a good listener. So
Write that information down, because I don't know if you're like me, I get going in different conversations and I want to remember if they say how many children they have, what their names are, their sport, all that, because I want to, like Tracy said, establish that relationship, because really real estate is all about relationships.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
Good call, Trace.
Yeah, no problem. So again, we're going to do a deeper dive into these things and talk about what does the pre-listing look like next week's live stream. So today was just a little, we're just going to touch on each one of these things. And then I think we'll have an opportunity to go deeper on another conversation. So there's the pre-listing appointment. Lots of things happen at the pre-listing appointment, including talking about the types of things in the house, talking about, do they have surveys available to them? What kind of information can they share with us about upgrades that they've done? What kind of information did we find before we came to that house? Did we go to BS&A? Do you guys use that tool?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'm preparing
Every
for a
time.
listing appointment. BSA, I'll go to the old listing if it was listed previously. If there isn't an old listing, you could go to CoreLogic or Realist, all that, and try to get as much, because I want to be knowledgeable and act like I know what I'm talking about all the time.
You do, and those are great resources too. I mean, when you're having that conversation with them on the phone, I mean, I always love to ask, hey, how long have you been at the home? And what were some of the things you did while you were there? So again, I'm jotting those down so that, again, those are good opening conversations when you do finally get in front of them. But the better prepared you can be, the better homework you can do up front. Again, that just reiterates to them that you really are taking the necessary time, even before the appointment, to know as much as you can know. Some of the homes that have sold in the neighborhood, what's the climate like in real estate? All of those things are things you prepare yourself for sitting down at that table.
Yeah. Have either of you ever been showed up at a listing appointment and after going to BS&A or looking at the previous listing card and noticing that the square footage is different from what the assessor says to what the previous listing says? And oftentimes that message is not good because you're looking, everything you can see is that the square footage on the house was 2,300. But yet when they bought the house, it said 2,550. So suddenly there's a big delta of a difference, and you're showing up with the bad news. My favorite is when I see a listing card and it says square footage, 2,300, source, owner.
Yeah.
Oh, so did we just look around and go, yeah, I think we got about 2,300 here. But when we look it up, it's really something different.
Yeah.
So, but that's something to pay attention to as an agent. When you see that it says owner, or even when it says appraisal, sometimes when it says appraisal, to me, that means that the appraiser said it was more square footage than maybe what the assessor is saying.
Yeah.
And so let's kind of see what is the difference.
Yeah, and it's kind of nice too. Now photographers will do that square footage for you too, just as a double check. That's kind of nice too. Then you have kind of a third opinion.
Hey, can I go back to a question that's always kind of interesting to me when I'm having these conversations with people? I've set the appointment. A follow-up question I always love to ask homeowners on the phone is, do you plan on interviewing any more agents with the job of selling your home? Or more than one agent for the job of selling your home? And I ask that question, I don't know if that just comes off like right away, like I really want to know my competition, but more importantly, they need to know how vested I am in their property. And when I ask those kind of be real questions, man alive, it just deepens that relationship, I think, even before I get to the front door. So I don't know why I thought of that question, but I just did, because I didn't want anybody to not be able to know their competition as they go into a listing appointment. It's important.
Yeah, because the whole idea is to get, I always try to pump myself up, I don't know, country music, whatever, on my way, but I want that listing. I want to come out of there having them say, hey, I'm going to list my house with you and all that. And if I'm competing, just say a prayer before I go in.
Well, but you want to know that. You want to know that.
You absolutely do. Yeah.
Kind of helps you know where they are.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to ask, because I always like, hey, I'm not afraid to have competition. Be confident.
Yes.
And then ask to be the last person. I want to be the last thought in their mind, but you don't always
good
get that,
idea.
You read my mind, Trace. That's exactly what I was going to say next. Great job.
Yeah. Yep. I don't want to be the middle one. The last one's great, but if I have to be the first, but I don't want to be the middle person.
Yeah.
Save the best for last.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, good. So let's assume now, we've had our listing appointment, and now let's assume that we've got the listing. Okay. So what's next?
Cindy, you want to take that next one?
Yeah. So we have the listing. My whole idea, I get this going. I want to set up a time. First of all, I call the photographer because I want to make sure they're on the books, because when I have a listing go live, I want it to be all complete. Set an appointment to get with the clients to do the listing agreements. I want to go back through the house. Sometimes I'll help change furniture around. That's just kind of my thing. And have a better view of that, but go through the documents with them, kind of go through the procedure. And once the photos are done, I basically want everything to be ready to go live.
Yeah. Hey, can I say something about photos? And I don't want to go down a rabbit trail, but what I've seen lately too in the multiple listing, especially different boards that I look at, is agents are getting a little bit lazy on pictures. And I don't know if there's a mindset, I don't know what goes on in their mind to say, hey, this house is going to sell no matter what. Okay.
Yes,
So I really don't need to take professional pictures, right? In fact, I'm just going to take less because maybe they'll call me and ask me more about my listing. And the reality is professional photos do what, guys? They present the property in a way that it needs to be presented at a very high level, right?
Yeah. That's your first view.
You got it. And how many people are online looking at those pictures? Where do those pictures go? They go everywhere, right? So again, take the necessary time. I'm a guy that just pays for photos. I don't even talk to the client about those. I say, folks, this is my commitment to you. I want to make sure that those photos are done well. Here's the company that I use. I take care of the cost of those things. And this is why.
Yeah.
And so when
You have other clients that'll come, that are looking to list with you. They'll get online and they want to see the quality of the marketing that you do. So it makes the marketing's really important, not only for your current client, but for clients that you get in the future. They are looking at that because they know, hey, it's my house, I want to market it. So the professional photos are absolutely the way to go.
Yeah, I didn't mean to slow down the process, Trace, but I did want to touch on pictures.
No,
That's
I like
important.
that. I always say that my pictures are my 24/7 open house. So I want people to love what they see, because people are looking for homes on their cell phones. They're looking on their tablets. They're looking on their computers. It's happening while they're laying in bed in the morning, in their car, when they're at lunch. It's happening all day long. So we really have to make sure that what we put out there looks really good for the public to see.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
yep. So I'm thinking about pictures being like, now we've been, stirring our cookies, right? We've plopped them on the pan, right? So that's the pictures. We've got them laid out. The next step is we're getting ready to put them into the oven. So, at that point, we're thinking about the public is now going to be seeing this home, and what does our marketing material look like? Have we done some of these things? And so these are the kind of the deeper layers we're going to go into when we do a deep dive next week. But we're going to list the house. We're going to get the house, all the photography done. We're going to get the lockbox on the front door, and we're going to make sure that the sign gets installed in the front yard. And then we're going to make sure that we communicate really good with our broker, right? Submit these things to the office for review. Call your broker support team to make sure that you filled these things out. I mean, Doug, you love getting calls like this.
I do. I can't. And something, I thank agents when they call, because it's not a weakness when you don't know, pick up the phone and call. Just make sure that you're getting those forms filled correctly. If there's a question as to what has to happen in what order in the process, again, another great reason to pick up the phone and call. You want to make sure that you feel very, very comfortable about the sequence, about what happens and what, in what order. Again, you also want to make sure that you're explaining that to your client. I mean, how often do people list houses, guys? Maybe not so often, right? So for you to be the pro, to sit down and with them and make sure that you share with them, hey, this is in order of sequence, this is what happens. The fact that you took the time to do that and really, really sink in that story as to what that has to look like, people really appreciate that. We talk about this with communication, and this is such a key, Tracy, to make sure that we're over communicating with our client. When we tell them we're going to call them, for heaven's sakes, we better call them. And that's a weekly call, a check-in call, or whatever early on in the process. You got to hold their hand. You got to hold their hand. So
follow up.
It's all about follow-up, isn't it?
Absolutely. And because it's interesting, on the front end of the transaction, there's all this communication. We're talking daily, sometimes hourly, and then all of a sudden you're pending and it slows down. But that doesn't mean you don't continue to pick up the phone and communicate with your client. So
absolutely,
they definitely want to hear from you. So we lost you there for a minute. Cindy, do you have anything?
Sorry about that. I don't know. I think they're working on my internet outside or something. I don't know.
Okay. So anyway, so now, you've got the house filmed. It is on the MLS now, and you're letting that process, take place. And from there, after you've done that, then you're going to have a pending transaction. And there's a lot of things that are going to happen between that process, but that's our deeper dive next week. So in the pending process, there's a lot of things that happens from the broker standpoint. The oversight that we have over all of our agents happens in the background. But if you're not communicating with our office, what can't we see? We don't know what's going on, right? We don't know.
You got to share your information in .loop. So they can review it, and if there's anything missing, all that.
When we talk about it, again, we talk about checklists. I feel like I'm back in the kitchen and we're baking again, right? But again, that closing file checklist that's in .loop, make sure you complete as much as you possibly can, or things that if you're working with the seller, obviously you can fill out the seller's side of that checklist. pretty in-depth. But do fill out the other side of that checklist as well with as much information as you possibly can. That's going to help the people that approve the loop when you send it for approval. It's going to help the title people, anybody that's involved in that transaction. You want to make sure that you have on there emails, phone numbers, any communication that you can have, mortgage, I mean, anything that you think is relevant to that going smooth, that needs to go on that closing file checklist.
Absolutely.
It helps prevent hiccups. You've got the information, because there's a lot of people involved in trying to help you move forward with that pending file.
Yep.
And any questions on that? That's where that, again, Tracy, back to what you said, pick up the phone and call us. Again, we want this process to go just as smooth as silk. And the more we're talking about that, it can get a little bit confusing through that pending piece.
Yep.
But the more we're talking through this, that's the key, in my opinion.
Yep, absolutely. So you're under contract, you've submitted your loop to the office for review. You're communicating with them. They know you have a transaction. There's an EMD in place, right? You're on the listing side, but you need to make sure that the buyer has delivered that. So again, a very key piece of your pending process. Then you move into the inspection process, and usually there's less needed from the seller. The biggest thing that's needed is that we need you to vacate your home so that the buyer can come in and do those inspections. But there are some inspections that a seller is responsible of doing depending on where you live. Cindy, you live in an area where you see a little bit of that based on county, right? What could that look like?
Yeah, well, and septic, because we have what's called point of sale in 2 counties here, Ingham and Barry. I'm sorry, Ingham and Shiawassee and Barry. But they, what it means is the seller is responsible to have that well and septic done prior to closing, because they have to get what's called a conformance letter stating that from the county that it's in good working order, and that's good for a year. So when I have sellers that have a well and septic that's in, I'll say, Ingham County, I make sure that they know ahead of time that that's a cost to them. And I try to get that scheduled because, like I said, that conformance letter is good for a year. So you could get that done even before you get an offer if you want.
Hey, Cindy, is that something you schedule?
I help them schedule that. I give them, I help them with who contractors are and what the prices are. And if they pick one and they want me to help schedule, yes, I will help them do that, because some sellers just aren't aware of that. So
Yeah.
We used to have it in more counties, but it's just in the 2, the Shiawassee Barry.
Yeah, but it can be a really big hiccup. Doug, do you guys have any of those over in Muskegon?
We do not. Again, it's usually controlled by the health department. Again, it's not something that's mandatory. And again, I go back to municipalities, right? Different municipalities might require different things.
Right.
You have kind of a unique situation, I think, in Lansing, where we might not have something like that in the Grand Rapids, Muskegon, Lakeshore area. So again, you got to be dialed into that, and you got to make sure that we're communicating, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Read your purchase agreements, because some of the purchase agreements state that it is a seller responsibility regardless.
Just about.
I've learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? My purchase agreement never had said anything about these point of sale or time of transfer inspections that need to be done. But we do have certain counties by me, and Northern Michigan is filled with counties that require that as well. So, you learn a lot by just reading listing tickets too. I mean, we have a lot of communities that require just a seller inspection of the property in order for it to transfer. And they call it I won't remember right now, but of course,
I do that all the time.
It's kind of like, it's like a certificate of occupancy.
Sure.
It's literally an
Okay.
inspection of certificate of occupancy. And they look at some of the silliest things, but they want to make sure when a house transfers that something as small as just having smoke detectors inside of every bedroom, outside the bedroom, in the kitchen, at the bottom of the hallway, kind of like FHA.
Yeah.
So when you're selling in one community versus the next door community, you need to know that this one requires it, but that one doesn't. And that's where you've got to become
Good point.
And you've got to get comfortable with calling these communities and asking them questions.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we recently had something come up regarding whether a home had city water or sewer. And this is another thing to call when you're the buyer's agent. If it says that it's city water and sewer, why not call the water department just to ask, hey, is the house at 123 Main Street? Is this well or city water and sewer? Yes or no, and make note of it. This is where this sets you apart from other people. So
Yeah.
As goofy as it sounds, I had a seller the other day, and they were in more of a rural area. Didn't know that they had public water. They thought they still had a well in the backyard that was still pumping well water, right?
It worked.
It worked. As long as they got water, that's all they care, right? But again, this is where you've got to do your due diligence. You got to, and again, call the municipality, get as much information as you possibly can. So, that's a good question, Tracy, on some of those inspections that aren't the norm, if you will.
Yep. Yeah, you could find out that water is at the street. You know, sometimes agents check the wrong boxes. Water at the street could mean the city water is at the street, but has not been hooked up to the house. So you could find out that, oh, okay, it's on a well, but city water is at the street. And if this well ever failed, I'm going to hook up to that. And there's going to be a cost associated with that.
Yep.
So anyways, just things to know, and every transaction you do, you'll learn something new about it.
It's a different one every time.
That's right.
Goes back to Tracy's experience, and that's in the backpack, right?
You got it.
Yep.
So anyway, so we've talked about inspections and the types of inspections, and then there's title insurance. So this is one of those activities that you're going to make sure that you order on the front end. You order the title work. Each side usually has their own title company depending on area. In the communities that I sell in, the buyer has their own title company and the seller side has their title company. And then get familiar with reading it. What kinds of things, you guys, can we find when we read title insurance, and what happens if we don't communicate what we found?
Assessments. Assessments can be, you don't want the seller finding out that they have an assessment at closing that you didn't read the title work, and because it can be thousands of dollars. It's very important.
Well, and let me say something about our title companies, in particular Star Title. Boy, are they open to listening and learning with you. If you've got questions on what to look for in a title policy, reach out to your title person. They're going to tell you the highlights. They're going to say, here's what we look for. And yes, obviously, who owns the property and some of those things. But to your point, some of those assessments, things that just come up, and my goodness, if you don't look into that early on in the process, that can become a major thing as we get towards the end, right?
Right. You could find out that you're dealing with somebody who's really not the owner.
Oh, yeah, that too.
Because that's never happened, Yeah, or that you need things like death certificates or divorce decrees.
Yeah.
There are a litany of things that could be needed. So read your title work. You have a responsibility to get that to your seller. And so order it soon, order it often, order it before you even go on the market. Because then if there are things, if it's in an LLC, things like that, you've got an opportunity to find some of these things. So
say that again, Tracy, so they hear that really loud. Order that before it goes on the market.
Right, exactly.
Star Title.
Right. They would be happy to do that for you in advance.
Please do that.
So then we'll kind of leave it at pre-closing, and then after closing, all the different things that need to be done in order to get the property closed. So anyway, so next week we'll have a deeper dive as to how to get the perfect cookie, and really the details that are involved in that a little bit more. And then I just want to say, feel free to, reach out to any of us. We've got, Marissa Harrington, Kim Anderson, Cindy Beckwith, Doug Hale, and myself are here. We're your 411, your information. That's how we try to describe ourselves. And then your 911 are your deal doctors. But we're really here for all of these types of questions and want to help you be successful in real estate. So
take advantage of us. Take advantage of us.
We're here.
Yep.
Well, sounds good. Well, thank you both for your time today. And we'll look forward to next week's deeper dive into list to close. Have a great day, everyone.
Doug. Bye-bye.
Okay, see ya.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Take care.